Hello, everyone. So it's my great pleasure to be the moderator. So you'll see me in different roles. Nikos seems to think I'm a jack of all trades, master of nothing. So it's a pleasure to have with me several esteemed colleagues and professors and pharma sector people on the panel of biobanks and clinical trials. Biobanks and clinical trials are actually one of the key infrastructures, more or less developed, less sometimes in some countries, more in others. And one of the key questions that we have, and I think we still are just missing one of our panelists, Professor Kostas Syrigos. We're going to start directly, and if you can join us later, we'll do that. So perhaps I'm going to start with a few questions, and at the end, we're going to go more on a broad one. But let me first introduce you, everyone. So Olympios Papadimitriou is the general manager for Novo Nordisk and the president of the Hellenic Association for Pharmaceutical Companies here in Greece. Diana Saraiva, so I don't speak Greek, so excuse me if I mispronounce your name, right? Is the director of clinical data science at Pfizer, Greece. And Joao Breda, we started to know each other just before 5 minutes ago she's Portuguese, yes, actually not Greek. So basically Portuguese in Greece. And Joao, you are actually the head of the WHO Athens quality of care for the WHO that is located in Greece. And I'm happy to have with us now Kostas Syrigos, who is a professor of medicine and medical oncology at the University of Athens and the School of Medicine. Thanks for coming. Don't worry, you're probably the only one that have patients that needs you. So let me start with you, actually, Professor Syrigos. So how do you see biobanks supporting the stratification of patients, and especially for rare drivers mutation in cancer?
I think biobanks. I think.
Oops,
You see, having patients does not always mean that you can handle a microphone. I mean,
that's okay.
It's a rocket science sometimes. I think biobanks and creating and preserving biobanks is very important in science and specifically in oncology. Mm-hmm. This provides us high quality data, provide us a lot of information, especially if they are well designed, the biobanks, and it gives the opportunity to the general population to be familiarized with the existence of biobanks and the need of biobanks, and this, I think, is very important in our society. And also, although there are a lot of problems, I am confident and I believe that it is only through the biobanks that we will be able to design and validate drugs that are going to be useful. This is particularly important in rare diseases. If we otherwise expect to collect the information needed for rare diseases, there is no other way. So I think biobanks are very important.
So one of the key questions, because I used to say that to Walter Blackstock, who was the GSK manager when he started his biobank at GSK, as a fridge management exercise. So how do you action your biobanks, and what's your idea behind, and what kind of value you can bring, mainly, for example, in thoracic surgery or in oncology of lungs, typically?
I sympathize a lot with GSK because 30 years ago, this is exactly how I started as well, and I think we have not moved very far away from that status, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. As science progresses, we need more and more data, which we had not thought in the beginning. We must reevaluate the data that we are collecting. Always there is a limited use in retrospective data. We must always bear that in mind. And on the other hand, the bigger the biobank, the more difficult to use the data. There is a huge gap between collecting data and collecting useful data. The gap is huge. And also there is a huge gap between patients that voluntarily participate in clinical trials and donate their biological material and the real-world patients. Mm-hmm. Usually patients that participate in clinical trials are the patients that are described in the books.
Yes.
The patients that we see every day are completely different.
Correct.
So these are problems that we must handle. The real world is not accurately represented by the biobanks. Exactly. For many, many reasons. This is a whole discussion. The big amount of patients in Western world, unfortunately, are underprivileged people. Mm-hmm. And these do not participate in clinical trials, do not participate in biobanks, and sometimes are not even diagnosed. So I presume that the algorithms of AI was made by some guys 20 to 29 living in Silicon Valley, driving a Porsche and sleeping 2 or 3 hours per day. Which has nothing to do with real people. Exactly. I think this is where we are with the biobanks. Yeah. WASPs, people that are very well aware of what clinical research means, that do constantly their test and screening test, are very happy to participate in clinical trials, but these are the minority. These people, I have nothing to do with them, that exercise 3 times per week, don't eat hamburgers, don't smoke, don't drink. But this is not the real world. Yeah, this is not the real world. True. And the most important of all, according to the existing ethical system, and this is a big problem in science, when patients or individuals give their consent to participate in clinical trials, they give the consent for a very specific reason and for nothing else. Sometimes we use these data, but this is a gray zone regarding if this is legal or not. I think that.
But I mean, that's good because, and I'm going to jump to Joao with questions, because we go from the very local, practical effects in the hospital with biobanks and with patients and the underdeserved people that are not actually the wealthy and healthy and young Silicon Valley or Swiss one, for example. So on the WHO, so how do you see biobanks playing a role in the global health equity, and especially for low and middle income countries, where the trial access actually are limited, or sometimes used in a questionable manner? I'm thinking about 25 years ago when some of my colleagues, where I worked in Serona, were saying, oh, we're going to do our trials in India, it's going to be cheaper. So the WHO point of view, from that point of view, is important, because as one of United Nations, important.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be at this, together with all these honorable guests, and thanks to the organizers for the invitation. We at WHO, we see ourselves as really safeguarding public health with everything we do and putting public health at the center of everything we do. We try to do that here in Athens and in Greece, where we have this Office on Quality of Care and Patient Safety, where these aspects, of course, play a very important role, with the great support of the Greek government for many years. And I always like to say that I already met 4 ministers since I'm here in less than 5 years, and that's really a great thing to be able to receive the support of Greece. And because many of you, the majority, I guess, are Greeks, I would like to publicly express the gratitude of WHO towards your support and your trust. Because we believe in proper governance, transparency, trust, accountability, and maybe I would like to underline even more equity. These are all main questions when it comes to biobanks and clinical trials, right? So while at one hand we acknowledge the need for innovation, and if you are in Europe, you always discuss why there's more innovation in the US or in here and there, and Europe is moving slowly and things like that. I mean, innovation is extremely important in the field of public health. This is critical. But at the same time, we really need to make sure that everything we do particularly serves more the most vulnerable, which are those we would like to push for leapfrogging and recover and moving fast and developing these groups of the population in giving them more privilege and more focus. So this sometimes is difficult when it comes to these type of things. And there is privilege here. So we would like this privilege to be available actually to everyone. And sometimes WHO could be like, the traditional and the classic and the bad guys in the room. But what we would like to see is really proper governance, transparency, accountability, and equity. And I think this is critical for the things that we are doing here. And when it comes to developing new technologies for new treatments and all of that, I think it's really very important that we look at the cutting edge for a very small rare disease, which I entirely agree, but we cannot forget that 70% of people die prematurely in Europe and 90% in Greece because of chronic conditions. And these deserve a lot of attention. And of course, this is probably not where a lot of money can be made. But this is where, for example, the private sector and all of those that are working on this need to pay more attention and also need to contribute, being part of the solution.
Yes. So you touch about some idea about the framework and in which WHO is working. So what's the policy framework that the WHO consider essential to make biobank data interoperable, and whether it's their mission or not, and ethically shared across the border? And I guess the last one is more important than the first one, because one is a technical, and typically WHO does not like to touch too much the techniques and the implementation.
Because as you know, we are an organization made of member states, and member states take the decisions. And of course, as we can raise the issue as the Secretariat, that requires that it's the countries that themselves, they decide together, many times in a unanimous way after years of conversations and discussions, and that can take you to a governance system or to a framework which only in very, very rare cases has actually, let's say, a legal context, because the vast majority of what we do in WHO is no more than recommendations, and almost everything we do, you have a resolution at the World Health Assembly, or you have a resolution at the Regional Committee for Europe. These are just recommendations that countries agree between themselves, but there is not a legal obligation, with the exception of the IHR and all these things. But it's very limited, so it's like we're sort of on the business of nudging, in a way, as the Secretariat, and identifying issues and bringing the data, because we're a science and evidence-based organization, and we are very proud of that, and we believe that, and we try to get all actors and stakeholders on board, also to take science into account, particularly government. It's a difficult one, we know that, but it's very important that science is there always, particularly in these times we are going through.
Thank you. So we are going from the hospital, from the biobanks that are very local, to the international organization. But one of the key partners are industrial players, because they bring the medicine, they are the drug discoverer, they are the drug implementer, and they are the biggest users of biobanks. So Diana, one question I have is, what lessons have you learned about patient engagement and consent process when working with either large or small biobank? And being in Pfizer, I mean, you are across different sites, Greece being one, but it's a global footprint. So you're treating all patients worldwide and not just not just the local one. So we have a patient calling now. So Diana. Seems that we have technical.
So I was not the only one.
No, that's okay. It goes also for data scientists.
Hi. Yes, now it's working. So first of all, let me start by thanking the organizing committee for inviting me, the chair and the panelists, my colleagues here for a great discussion so far. Thank you very much for that question, because it's a very important question. The way we build our clinical studies and the way we build our biobanks comes especially from patient engagement and how we can make sure that the subjects will be engaged to participate in these clinical studies. Let me give you some examples. When we are talking about biobanks, at Pfizer, our clinical studies that are collecting samples for specific questions in our clinical studies or for specific endpoints, we are also including what we call a retained research sample. So this is something that is collected extra, that is going to allow to build our biobank and future research to be done on this population. So, of course, when we are explaining this to the subjects, it kind of appears like an extra sample that is going to be collected, an extra blood tube, an extra biopsy. This is, as you can imagine, sometimes not well received. So the way we can make sure that we are engaging patients is by having a clear communication, good consent model where we are explaining the benefits, why we are wanting to do this future research, who is going to benefit from it. So have a clear communication in that sense. And also, one of the important things for patient engagement is making sure that we have, as you were saying, like the multi-country, multi-site clinical studies, we have to make sure we have local teams so that we have the documentation in local language, for instance. And also, in case of these future research samples, we are talking about countrywide legislation, which really changes from country to country. So we have countries where these samples are actually mandatory to be collected, some countries where it's optional, so subjects can give consent to the whole clinical study and not for this specific sample, so this also needs to be explained. And we also have countries where this is not even applicable, so we need to make sure that we are following the local legislation, the local regulations, explaining everything to the subjects so that they know what are they participating and what's going to be the benefit.
So there seems to be quite a lot of dialogue, right, with the patient at each and every level and with all the stakeholders. And one of the questions is, people talk about partnerships, and some people just want the money, other people want to have a long-term relationship. So how do you, and I'm caricaturing this, right, completely, but are there specific partnerships with academic centers or biobank consortia that you see as game changer for accelerating the trials? And what would these be, in your opinions? That are going to go after that to the other pharma that we have here. It's also
interesting
important.
question. Of course, we all know that we cannot work isolated. We cannot be in the silos. The partnerships are crucial. We do have some partnerships with academic institutes, with some biobanks, especially thinking about the early research, the target identification. So this is something that we encourage, we strive for, to have these partnerships because we know their importance. Mm-hmm. We also have an initiative that it's quite recent where we can be contacted by people that are interested to establish new partnerships that want to somehow collaborate on the clinical studies that have already passed, so that we already collected data on, mm-hmm. for like secondary research, for new hypotheses to be discovered. So we know how important this is, and we strive to maintain those.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to Mr. Papadimitriou. So, do you see and it's going to be also an open question towards the end, but do you see a future where pharmaceutical sponsors directly and invest in regional biobank infrastructure, not for themselves and their clinical trials, but more globally as an asset? I'm thinking of myself 20 years ago when I was in Serono, where we started with Pfizer, Novo Nordisk, Servier, and Sanofi, and created the IMI-GU, which was the 1 billion from the European Commission, the 1 billion from the pharma, which some people say it's a success. I mean, normally if you have an IHI for health, an IHI that follows the IMI, it actually was something where pre-competitive aspects were part of it. And the biobank, in one sense, is a pre-competitive landscape because everyone needs it. And it seems that biobank has not been really a cause. So do you see this as a possibility? Thinking also that the Novo Nordisk has the Novo Nordisk Foundation. It's an inverted ownership in that sense from a foundation to the company. So I'm thinking about this in asking you specifically that question because you have a structure that is different than other pharma.
I wish I was that close to the foundation, but there is certain distance from Denmark to Greece. In any case, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to be here, and I would also like to congratulate BioInnovation Greece for organizing this whole event. I believe that it's very important to promote, let's say, the concept of advancing biotechnology, especially in Greece. I believe that we have a very long way to go. On the other hand, it's worth a big effort to stop being just brain exporters. So let's hope that efforts like this will bring fruits sooner or later so that we will be able to develop our own research that will be exportable instead of exporting people to do the research somewhere else. Now, regarding your question, I'm not sure that I can cover this in the best possible way. I have certain knowledge that obviously my company is working with international biobanks. I would dare to say, though, that it is more likely to have common efforts between pharma industry, and I mean multiple companies, and also academia or governments or even the European Union, because I do not believe that isolated efforts, first of all, are affordable, but also are able to, let's say, create the size that we would like to have in terms of samples in biobanks in order to make, let's say, multidimensional research. I do not know, to be honest, what kind of involvement the foundation has, and also I know that the company is dealing with, in collaboration also with some other companies, some academic. I cannot, or I would not like to disclose something at this stage. But overall, I believe that this is a very broad area. I would like to say about Greece, for example, that from the search I also have done, I do not believe that we have created, or that we are in a process of creating a kind of, let's say, broad spectrum biobank. I found in the web some efforts about actually starting several years ago, but I'm not sure that something has happened out of those, to create some kind of collective, some kind of common biobank between Greek universities, etc. I have not heard of some outcome. And one thing I can say, at least, I also do not know any pharmaceutical companies doing research based on samples from existing samples from biobanks. They most of the times they collect samples from patients and use them also in their own biobanks for the future, because obviously we keep our samples. After all, there is also the informed consent to the patient about that. Yes. But in that sense, I would say that we are far behind as a country. I don't know how much better things are in Europe. But I believe that it is absolutely necessary that this whole thing comes under the umbrella of the government. It's a very delicate area, very useful, can have very, very interesting outcomes, but also contains a lot of risks. So for the interest of the majority of people and the citizens, I think that it should be the government on top of these things and create and monitor a framework that could promote the existence of biobanks in Greece. At the same time, I have to express my doubts how competent, let's say, the state mechanism would be to go after this ambitious project.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was a bit the question about the potential private partnership, public partnership, which the IMI has been kind of pushing in that sense. But that strongly depends on people and,
yes,
and
but
not only on the environment.
And obviously, I think it should go beyond country level.
Yes,
it should be multi-country. Obviously, the European Union is a frame that we could, let's say, collaborate under which we could collaborate. But you know, looking at for Greece only, well, let's keep our ambition a little bit lower.
Yeah. You had just one thing you want to comment, perhaps?
I would like a comment on what Mr. Papadimitriou said. From my experience regarding the patients willing to participate in clinical trials and most importantly, handling in their data, I think that probably the worst to take over this job is the most obvious one, the government and the industry. The general population are very suspicious how they are going to use the data. From previous experience and history, they recall several examples that there was leaking of their data. And most of the general population are afraid of the Leviathan monster that is represented by the state. I think that although they are not efficient at all, and I apologize for that, institutes like the universities or WHO probably are more suitable of doing that, or cancer institutes or something more academic. And besides, when the government step in, this takes a sense of obligatory,
yes.
And this should be based on voluntary basis only.
Not on forcing people, that's true. So it's a good segue into opening the discussion for all of you. And I have a few questions. I'm looking at the time and the organizers. We should do a few questions and then open up for the public. So we still have about 11 minutes. And it's becoming red. That stressed me. So one of the questions for all of you is, how do you ensure actually diversity? And we touched upon that in the beginning of that panel discussion. Diversity in terms of genomics, ethnic, because Greece is also a bit of a mixture, and Europe is a mixture as well, from a genetic point of view. Socioeconomics as well, that opens to in biobanks, so that trials results are generalizable. Because one of the problems that I think all of us face when people are running in clinical trials is to know whether the patient population is effectively the right one. So perhaps if someone can take this one and we go with this.
Thank you. I think one of the ways we can think of is establishing studies that are multi-country, multi-site, not only focus on a specific population, so have a wide range of population going through multiple sites. We should engage patients' associations, because this is very important also to know how to recruit the population that will benefit or that will actually be enrolling in that clinical study. There's also the patient advocacy groups that we should look into. And then coming back what I said before, so having local teams, local language of the documentation. I don't know if you guys ever saw an informed consent, but it's like pages and pages and pages of text, sometimes very hard to read. So we should be there for questions, because questions will appear. Yeah. And we can only make sure that we are engaging patients if they are understanding the clinical study.
Exactly.
I think addressing a diversity between states is easier. And special industry can say that we recruit only 10% of the participants from this state, finished, period. The most difficult is to address diversity within the society. The low socioeconomic status, the low education, minorities like gypsies, people like that. And we have this problem in screening cancer as well. I believe the only way is that we should go to them, not sit in our offices and expect for them. Encourage clinical trials that could happen in the house rather than in the hospital, or by the family doctor, or engage social workers in the neighborhoods. This is the only way.
Yeah, I think, and I'm a bit strange to this field, I have to be honest. This is why I'm enjoying so much the discussion. For me, point number one, clearly from the discussion, I believe, on a personal note, if I may, that there's really a need for a governance of all this field and frameworks where different stakeholders can work together, right? And here, obviously, you could say there's role for international organizations, there's role for governments, and all of that. Clearly, I think that's important, and that would ensure the ethics and the participation and all of that. Engagement of patients, clinicians, and all of that. Not just the organizations, because let's be honest, sometimes the organizations are biased and also slightly manipulated across many, many areas. So I think we really need to engage with patients, their families, and practitioners, doctors, and many others in a logic of co-creation. That's my second point. And my third point, I heard a lot about, developing new things and treatments and options and all of that. But this is about really improving the life of people. And it's improving your potential for a good life and well-being. And it's about improving outcomes that matter to patients and their families. If you lose that from sight, then you're just in business. And I think that's not fair as a society. So I think, okay, maybe you believe this is just another WHO guy talking about these equity issues, but I think that as societies, this is really very important. Like it is to keep the Greek brain inside, because you have among the best scientists I've seen in my life, and I don't say this to flatter you, because I even compare with the research community in my own country, and the Greeks are really outstanding, I have to tell you. But then how does it translate into your common good in the society? So this is all about public good. You talk about public-private partnerships, but I think that we should always have the public good at the top that, sort of governs that. Thank you.
So I know predictions are hard to do, right? So in 5 to 10 years, what is your vision for how Biobank will interact with the clinical care? Because we talk about the clinical trials, but this is only one part of the equations. The clinical care, which is what you see probably with your patient every day, is how to implement that really for everyone that comes into the clinic at one stage of his life and more towards the aging. So what's your vision in the 5 to 10 years for that? And one, and my phone locked up, so I don't remember the question fully by heart. Is it actually reasonable to think that we'll have a fully consented EHR at one stage that could talk to the biobanks, or it's still a wet dream of some AI gurus? It's a bit provocative, sorry.
In 5 years, nothing will change. I mean, there is a gap between what we discuss and how this will be translated in clinical practice. And if we discuss that with the authorities or with the patients, they have other problems, much more important, with less cost that can change everyday life for the patients. Okay. So I don't think that we discuss maybe for the next generation of scientists.
So 25 years.
For me, not for you, of course. For your generation. But if our generation wants to do something, there are much easier, less cost things to do.
I know predictions are the hardest stuff because
especially about the future.
Wrong.
Especially about the future. Well, No, I will not make any kind of prediction. What I would like to say is that from the side of the industry, over the last couple of years, we are doing a very big effort here in Greece to extend our activities in the area of clinical trials. And I'm saying that because we are doing that despite the fact that we are operating in a quite hostile business environment. Mm-hmm. And I believe that these efforts are bringing some fruits. These activities are growing. Companies, not all companies, but several companies are investing more versus the past in the area of clinical trials. And I would dare to say also that it seems also that patients are more open, more aware and more open, less suspicious. I don't know, Professor obviously has bigger experience than me, but from the area that we are working, metabolic diseases, etc., we see willingness to participate. And I would also say that patient associations are always asking us in the industry association, for example, how could we be informed more about what trials are happening where, etc. So I think that we are in a rather positive direction. Of course, this is a very competitive environment because every country tries to attract. These are definitely significant investments in each country. And whatever we do, we should not rely on the present. We have to work always for the future because even if we make a progress, others may do the bigger progress. So it's a continuous effort. And okay, regarding 5 years from now, I would tend to agree that not much will change, especially here.
So let's see if the panel is actually rather pessimistic on the future. Let's see if there are questions or comments from the audience that are more potentially optimistic or realistic. So I open the floor to the...
Thank you for a thought-provoking discussion and for being at the trenches. I'll use your terminology that biobanks are an asset. They are an asset if we use them. If we invest in them without using them, in accounting terms, they're a liability, like balance sheet, simple. So the UK has been at it for about 20 years. They're still not there, but they have some lessons that a fledgling system can learn from. And justly so, we say that that Greece can be is a single health system and can leverage this, right? But it has to do two things. It has to be embedded in clinical practice, and it should become a research infrastructure. Whether it's for clinical trials or more IP-sensitive research, there's this potential. You kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit, and I don't neglect you because you have the experience of many years. But for the next generation to have a result, strategy needs to be set now because it's the roadmap to becoming. So if you had all the resources and if people listen to you, what needs to start happening now, and I'm talking to the seasoned gentlemen, but also the new generation, and I think how you started talking about partnerships. So all of you in reality, but I'm challenging mostly the gentleman who tried to, ground us. I'd like you to think ahead and tell us, what should we start working on now?
Right. First of all, let me let you know that Italy, France and Germany have a national program of database and screening in cancer. All the four most common cancers. This has started at least 10 years ago, and only 50% of the patients are registered. It is free, it is clinical valuable, and still only 50%, you take therapeutic decisions out of this, and still only 50% participate. There are many reasons, we can discuss it. The important thing is, if I had one decision to make for the next generation to have a really valid biobank may ask two things instead of one. The one would be money, because most of the biobanks start, and when the grant is over or the funding is over, it stops. There is not even follow-up. The industry starts, the European Union will get a grant. This grant is for 1 year, for 2 years, for 5 years, and when the money are over, it stops. So we need a constant row of money. And the second, we need a very clear-cut SOP, a very clear-cut instructions of collecting, preserving, and using the data. Because all these banks, if now we want to unify them, it's impossible. So money and instructions for unifying way.
Correct. So perhaps one thing on here, and another question. But there is hope. There is what is called the BBM. No, that's going to be for next generation. But at the European level, there is the BBMRI that is considered to be an infrastructure. And if the infrastructure is funded like the roads and the highways at the European level for all the country and not only for one, then we have perhaps a hope. And it's part of the, again, of the Draghi report on page 67 for the one that wants to read.
So I would like to follow up on the previous question, which I think was spot on. Have you ever submitted the proposal to the Ministry of Health? I don't know who is responsible for that, for a national biobank. I mean, there must be some leaders in the field, I mean, clinical leaders, who can coordinate this. Has any proposal ever submitted?
I practice medicine in oncology in Greece for 27 years. Over these 27 years, I have heard most of the ministers of health to announce a national registry for cancer patients. Even the current minister still is not working. The registry. Shall I go and ask for biobank? He will laugh. Clinicians outdoor of their office have 10 patients and 20 relatives waiting desperately for information. They don't have the time. They don't have the money.
Actually, I think it's going to be a good discussion for the lunch. I guess we have the lunch. Because the question is, who is responsible into this? And it's a shared responsibility. By the way, Greece has a BBMRI representative, and they need to create an organization here in Greece for the biobank. And this is an infrastructure like any other, like we heard this morning about Elixir. This is actually key to the ecosystem, and you need to have that. And you might use the Swiss way of doing this. We never had a Swiss-wide biobank. We created what is called the Swiss Biobanking Platform because the Swiss National Fund was giving money to projects where they created biobank, and when the money was gone, the database and the biobank disappeared. And they realized that this was not sustainable. So they created an organization at the national level, funded by the Swiss National Funds, to really continue this and become the echo chamber also towards the politicians to get the money and maintain that. Because each and every practice of medicine, be it thoracic oncology, be it hepatic surgery, etc., has their own needs. And all of them do ex tempo. And the day they do ex tempo, they collect samples, and that becomes a biobank, which has a value and which needs to be maintained. And this is actually not something for the surgeon, it's actually for the ecosystem and also the administration to take that ball and walk with it. And promises are always easy, it's only the one that wants to believe in it that's it. So I think it's time for the lunch, and thank you very much for the lively discussion and thank you.